Gapada pagarega sare darisa sagare. Hi, I'm Rohit, and this is Mind on a Leash. This course was created to help you understand and deal with your mind. An untamed mind can cause an incredible amount of suffering. In the past videos, we've talked about the ego as the virtual self, and we've also talked about archetypes. All of that is going to be the foundation for what we're about to discuss today, and that is the inner critic and the influence that has upon our lives, how to deal with it, and also how to then go to the next level of becoming truly non-judgmental. It's a big topic. I'm really excited about this one, and let's dive in. I refer to the inner critic as the bully within. I grew up with lots of bullies in high school. For many years, I had no idea how to deal with either bullies in the outer world or my inner world. In high school, I remember running off to the library, and many of us try to do things like this. We try to escape from that inner critic. We try to avoid it by maybe watching some movie or TV or taking a drug or smoking something or going on a vacation or going on a holiday or something, some way. We don't want to be with ourselves, and otherwise we seek to be with friends and dance and party and listen to music and whatever we can. But if you really look at it, it's that we are uncomfortable being with ourselves. It's really hard being with yourself when you have something that lives inside you that is constantly judging you, criticizing you, evaluating you, calling you names and putting you down. Why would anyone want to be with that? So that's why we do as much as we can to escape. Even being busy is another form of escape. Constantly being with people is an escape. Shopping, so many of our addictions are escapes. As children, we were naturally happy, loving, and carefree. We had minimal discernment or logic or judgment. We didn't really care about what people thought of us. We definitely didn't judge and criticize ourselves. Gradually it began. The way it works is this, that our logical mind develops about 50% by the age of 5, 80% by the age of 8, and 100% by age 16. Now, as the logical mind develops, so does its ability to analyze and judge and criticize. As its belief systems form, it becomes more rigid, stubborn, and convinced of its own truths. See, the mind makes up truths. It interprets the world around us. It then believes what it has interpreted and now becomes convinced of that and sees the world through that lens. The more this happens, the more we lose the happy, playful, curious part of ourselves that we had as a child. Your inner critic relies on logic and ignores feelings. It works as a fault finder. It inspects everything you do and focuses on what is wrong in myself, and then it does the same with others. It judges you and others. It compares you and others. It measures, it criticizes. It is a taskmaster that leaves no room for enjoyment, ease, or peace. Even when you are relaxing, it's there. What are you doing? Why are you relaxing right now? You need to be doing this. You need to be doing that. It's on your case. The saboteur is another part that interacts with the inner critic. Because the inner critic is being hard on you, another part forms that wants to try to get away from it. And so that part will lead to procrastination and escapism and avoidance. It's a reaction to the inner critic. The inner critic can be like a judge that's condemning you and punishing you. The problem is we let it do that. The problem is that we let it say to us things like, how could you do this? What's wrong with you? You're such an idiot. You're going to fail. And we feel hopeless and despondent. Obviously, the inner critic controls us by criticism, which makes us lose our spontaneity, our peace, our joy. It controls us by shoulding us. The result is a constant treadmill of doing. It controls us through self-doubt. And the result of that is low confidence and self-esteem. It controls us through speculation. And the result of that is anxiety about the future. It controls us through regret. And the result is guilt about the past. Ultimately, it controls us through shame, and it makes us feel that we're not good enough or that we're unworthy. The inner critic fills us with negativity. It controls our mind, it drains our energy, and it makes us unhappy and fearful. Along with self-criticism, the inner critic also compensates for our inadequacies by creating a false sense of external control and superiority. You might begin to think, I'm good. I'm a good person. And you can do this through people pleasing and trying to look good and dress well and so on. Or being very moralistic or being very religious. All ways in which to make yourself feel like you're superior to others. The other way it might do it is, I'm right. And that might lead to all kinds of argument and aggression. It might lead to all kinds of righteous behavior and thinking yourself as more evolved or more religious or more moralistic than others and imposing your standards on others. It may lead you to think, I'm better. You would rely on your career or your beauty or your fitness or your strength or your intellect to give you another sense of superiority. And sometimes it gives you this idea of, I'm free. And that can be through escapism, addiction, obsession, and even insanity. The mind creates incredible ways for us to deal with this inner critic. The inner critic tries to push us down, and we try to push ourselves up through all of these mechanisms. But do they work? Do they really make us happier? Do they make us more in charge of ourselves and our lives? Do they give us the experience of life that we want to have? Or are we on a treadmill where we're trying to appease the inner critic? The more critical you are, in other words, the more power you've given to the inner critic, the more likely you are to have stress, anxiety, worry, and depression. The more likely you are to be judgmental, critical, and hard on yourself and others. More likely you are to be dissatisfied and be a perfectionist. Now, what happens when someone judges, criticizes, or calls us names? Have you noticed? You might have seen it in children, and you might have experienced it as a child, that your mind goes into a state of fear. It shuts down and does not learn. You tend to repeat the mistakes that you made. For example, think of a parent who might say to their child, how many times do I have to tell you not to do this? Not to leave your clothes all over the place, or not to leave the dirty dishes in the sink. How many times do I have to tell you? And if you'll notice from this statement, the parent is saying the same thing again and again and again to the child, and the child isn't learning. Why? Because their mind has shut down. You'll see this in adults. One person nags another, and you'll find that that person then tends to just not do what needs to be done. It just doesn't work. And they tend to repeat the same mistakes, and the judgment continues endlessly. Here's the problem. If you submit to the criticism, you will lose your confidence, your individuality, and keep repeating your mistakes. If you rebel from the criticism, you'll tend to do the opposite, but not necessarily what you really want to do. Either way, you will lack confidence and have low self-esteem. The probable cause of all of that is self-deprecation. And what is the cause of that? Growing up in a critical environment. You see, your parents were like this, your teachers were like this, the people around you were like this, and as a result of which, that way of dealing with yourself got programmed into your mind. This may also be the probable cause of narcissism, where instead of being critical, the parent now becomes constantly praising the child and emphasizing on their self-esteem, giving them rewards, treating them as if they're special and above all others, giving them the feeling that they can do no wrong. That doesn't work either. That leads to someone who has a grandiose persona, a sense of entitlement, a constant need for validation, and the need to put others down. We see this narcissism all around us these days, and it's had a terrible impact on our lives, going from one extreme of being critical to the other extreme of being narcissistic. We see this in our social media. We see this in people around us. It's become ubiquitous, all-pervasive. Any way you look at it, the inner critic is in control. It is your master, and you are its puppet. It will do anything to maintain control over you. If you hate it, that's what it wants. Now it's in charge. If you love it, That's what it wants. Again, it's in charge. Do you judge yourself and others? How does it feel? Really check in. How does it feel to play judge and jury? Do you feel powerful? Do you feel superior? Do you feel better? Have you noticed that when we judge others, they end up judging us? Because everyone's doing it to everyone else. What goes around comes around. Many years ago, I heard this line. It's from the Bible, and it says, "Judge not, lest you be judged." These words had a huge impact on me. I said, wow, I don't like being judged. I grew up with a lot of judgment. Everyone was kind of hard on everyone else. It was crazy. And when I heard that, it's like, man, I'd love to live in a world where I'm not judging myself and other people aren't judging me. Is there a way to really stop this? Can I do this? I want to do this. Judge not, lest you be judged. So I took it to heart, and I decided I was not going to judge anyone else. But I also did something else, because a part of me went, hey, me too. I also don't want to be judged. So I decided, all right, I won't judge anyone else, and I won't judge myself either. I took it on like a vow, like a commitment, and I began to follow that. And it had a huge impact on my life. I became kinder, gentler, softer. I became more loving to myself and others. Like all those things followed naturally from that commitment, from that vow to not judge. Your mind might say to you, I can't do this. It's impossible. Your mind is habituated to beating you up. It's been doing it for your entire life. And it will take a determined effort to change this. If you have the ability to not randomly kill people, if you have the ability to not steal things that you like, if you have the ability to drive on the right side of the road and not the wrong side of the road, then you have the ability to train your mind to do this too. That means you've developed a certain level of control over your mind. It means that you have a certain level of mastery, a certain skill set that has come about by training your mind. A lot of people want to love themselves, but how can you love yourself and beat yourself up at the same time? How can you say to yourself, I love you, and then the next minute be telling yourself, you're an idiot, you're a jerk, what is wrong with you? Imagine loving a child this way, and a lot of people do. They'll tell their child one minute, I love you, and the next minute they're criticizing them and punishing them and giving them time out or whatever else that people do these days. It doesn't work. If you love someone, you have to be consistent in that. You cannot be flip-flopping around in your way of loving someone. If love is not consistent, it produces all kinds of problems in the human mind. The mind cannot trust, do you really love me or do you not? Now the same thing happens internally with us. Our mind cannot trust us when we say to ourselves, oh, I love you. When we say to ourselves, you're so beautiful or you're so smart. Yeah, we can say these things, but the next minute we're going to say something else. So unless we are consistent, it does not work. So before you try to love yourself, you're going to have to stop beating yourself up. You're going to have to stop judging yourself. You cannot do this sometimes. It has to be all the time. It has to be consistent. Self-flagellation is not an option. Judging yourself by calling yourself names, by criticizing yourself, by fault-finding is not an option. Discernment is not the same as judgment. We need to be able to discern between what is good or bad, what hurts and what feels good, what works and what doesn't. Discernment is helpful. Judgment is destructive. Would you be willing to make a commitment to not judge yourself? Because only when you take that commitment will it be possible to not judge others. Would you be willing to say no to your mind whenever it wants to judge and criticize you? This is the homework I propose for you. Stop judgment. Make an irreversible decision. Say to yourself, from now on, I will not judge anyone, including myself, ever. You're learning a new skill and you will make mistakes. But tell yourself, I give myself permission to make mistakes. So these are two really important pieces. One is, I will not judge anyone, including myself, ever. The other is, I give myself permission to make mistakes. Write these down if you need to. If your mind does start to judge you, just say, Cancel, cancel, cancel. Be watchful. Be consistent. Be firm. You can apply this to all forms of mind chatter or negative thinking as well. But let's start here with judgment. In the next video, we're going to learn about the authentic self, discovering who you truly are, because that is the seat of power. And that is the place from which you're going to be able to really step up your game in being able to take charge of your mind. After that, we'll get into learning how to become the boss of your mind. There's a lot to be learned here, and I'll see you in the next one.